Face a brand new chart for the head and for the heart. It's your journey, your tools.
You know, when you are standing on the beach, like just looking out at the ocean, the water usually looks completely manageable.
Oh, totally. It looks peaceful.
Right. But if you have ever suddenly been caught in a riptide, I mean, that perception changes in an instant.
It is genuinely terrifying because you are suddenly being pulled away from the shore by this force you can't even see. The ground is just, gone from beneath your feet.
Exactly. And your first primal instinct is to just swim as hard as you can directly against the current.
Yep, you panic.
You completely panic.
Yeah.
You try to use sheer brute force willpower to conquer the ocean, which is, ironically, exactly how people drown.
Because they exhaust themselves.
Yes, they exhaust themselves trying to fight a biological and physical current that is simply stronger than they are. And today, we're taking a deep dive into how we do the exact same thing with our own brains when a craving hits.
It is such a perfect analogy, really, because whether it is the intense urge to pour a drink after a stressful Tuesday, or the gravitational pull of your phone for a 2 a.m. doom-scrolling marathon.
Oh, we have all been there.
Right. Or even just walking into the office break room and feeling completely overpowered by a stale box of donuts. Cravings are just universal. But our standard strategy of using brute force willpower to fight them, it is biologically flawed.
Right, because it relies on a massive misunderstanding of what a craving actually is. We tend to view cravings as a moral failing or a lack of discipline.
Which is so unfair to do to yourself.
It really is. So, pulling from clinical research, neurobiology, and mindfulness strategies, our mission today is to look at how these urges are actually just biological events occurring in your brain.
Yes, just biology, not a character flaw.
Exactly. And once you understand the mechanics of what is happening under the hood, you can stop judging yourself and actually start learning how to write it out.
It is a radical shift in perspective. But before we get into the tactical tools of how to, surf that wave, we really have to understand what the water is made of.
Right. Like, why do urges feel so physically overpowering in the moment?
Well, it all comes down to a neurotransmitter you have definitely heard of, dopamine. Though we need to correct a major misconception right out of the gate here.
Let's hear it.
Dopamine is not just a pleasure chemical. Fundamentally, it is a learning and prediction signal.
Right. And the sources mentioned Dr. Judd Brewer, who is a leading researcher in this field. And he points out that this dopamine learning system is so ancient and so foundational to survival that scientists can actually observe it working in sea slugs.
Sea slugs, I love that detail.
I mean, organisms with only 20,000 neurons, it is just baked into our DNA.
Exactly. The biological mandate for a sea slug is pretty straightforward. You see food, you eat food, you feel good, and you remember what you ate and where you found it.
Trigger, behavior, reward.
Trigger, behavior, reward. Repeat. Dopamine is the chemical that basically stamps that experience into the nervous system with a bright red tag that says, do this again to survive.
So it's a pure survival mechanism at its core.
It is.
But, I mean, humans aren't sea slugs looking for algae on a rock.
Yeah.
We are dealing with much more complex environments.
We are. But our brains do not easily distinguish between a true survival reward and a modern artificial one. To your brain, a reward is a reward.
Ah.
Whether it is a calorie-dense meal in the wild, the ping of a new social media notification, or the temporary relief from anxiety that, say, a cigarette provides.
So the system gets confused.
And hijacked. This is where the entire system gets hijacked. Over time, as a bad habit forms, the dopamine spike actually shifts in your timeline.
Wait, what do you mean it shifts?
So it stops firing when you actually get the reward, and it starts firing earlier when you experience the cues that predict the reward.
Oh, wow. Meaning just walking past your favorite bar, or feeling a spike of stress at work, or simply hearing your phone buzz in your pocket?
That is the trigger. That anticipation is the trigger for the dopamine release.
That makes so much sense.
Precisely. When that environmental cue hits, a region deep in your brain called the ventral tegmental area fires rapid, intense bursts of dopamine.
Which creates that deep craving.
Right. It creates a state of deep anticipation. Neuroscientists literally call it wanting, and this kicks off a whole neurochemical storm in your head.
A storm that we usually interpret as panic.
Because your amygdala, which is the brain's threat and stress center, becomes hyperactive. It generates acute anxiety, irritability, physical restlessness. You literally feel a physiological state of emergency.
Okay, this perfectly explains why my logical brain genuinely believes that eating an entire sleeve of Oreos at 11 p.m. is a fantastic life-or-death survival strategy.
Right, because it feels urgent.
It does. Because while those alarm bells are ringing in the amygdala, the rational part of the brain is being actively shut down.
That is exactly what happens.
Yeah.
The prefrontal cortex, which is your center for logic, rational planning, impulse control, it is essentially taken offline by that very stress response.
It just powers down.
Yep. The brain diverts all its energy away from logic and into immediate, impulsive action just to resolve the perceived threat.
Which brings the whole thing right back to that riptide analogy. If you try to swim directly against a riptide using just willpower, you will drown in exhaustion.
Because your rational brain is literally deactivated.
Yeah, your rational brain is offline while your survival brain is screaming at you that you are in danger. But, I mean, if our logic center is chemically shut down during a craving, it kind of feels like we're just doomed to give in.
It definitely feels that way. But the problem isn't that the urge is unbeatable. The problem is our strategy of fighting it.
We fight back when we shouldn't.
Exactly. Fighting the craving actually reinforces the craving. There is a concept in behavioral psychology called the abstinence violation effect, which closely ties into this dynamic.
Let's unpack that a bit, because it sounds like the exact trap most people fall into when they try to break a habit.
It is the ultimate trap. Here is what typically happens. You feel the urge, and you try to white-knuckle your way through it. You grit your teeth, you try not to think about it, and your distress just keeps mounting.
Right, the tension becomes agonizing.
It does. And eventually, when you finally give in just to relieve that unbearable pressure, your brain gets a massive dopamine payoff.
Because it registers that giving in was a survival necessity. Like, it thinks it stopped the pain you were causing yourself by fighting.
Yes, exactly. Your brain learns that the only way to turn off the fire alarm is to feed the habit. And that cements the loop even deeper.
So by fighting it, we are training our brains to crave it more.
Unintentionally, yes. The secret to recovery isn't fighting the distress. It is learning to sit with the discomfort until the alarm turns itself off naturally.
So if swimming against the current just pulls us under, the alternative is learning how to float on top of it. Which brings us to the clinical research that points heavily toward this concept of urge surfing.
Urge surfing is huge. It was introduced by the late psychologist Dr. Alan Marlett, and it is a cornerstone practice in addiction recovery and mindfulness.
And the premise is pretty literal, right?
Yeah, the premise is to treat an urge like an actual ocean wave. It starts small, it rises to a peak, it crests, and then it naturally crashes on the shore.
And the most empowering detail from the empirical research here is that if an urge is left unmet and unreinforced, it simply doesn't last forever.
It really doesn't.
A craving typically peaks and subsides within 15 to 30 minutes. You don't actually have to do anything to make it go away. You just have to endure the wave without feeding it.
And just knowing there is a 15-minute expiration date on the intense agony makes it much more manageable. But balancing on the surfboard when the water is choppy takes a specific technique.
Because you can't just stand there doing nothing.
Right, you have to actively observe what is happening.
The sources outline a neuroscience-backed strategy for this called Name It to Tame It, which was developed by psychiatrist Dr. Dan Siegel.
Such a powerful tool.
It is. When the craving hits, you are supposed to simply label the emotion or physical sensation with absolute precision. So you say, internally or out loud, this is a craving, or I am feeling a tight knot of anxiety in my chest.
And by doing that, you are actively engaging the linguistic, rational part of your brain. Functional MRI studies have shown that this single act of affect labeling actually reduces the reactivity in the amygdala.
Wait, just naming it calms the brain down.
Just naming it, it pulls blood flow and electrical activity back into the prefrontal cortex, basically bringing your logic center back online.
That is incredible. You are essentially using language as a bridge to connect the emotional and rational parts of the brain.
Exactly.
But hold on, if I'm sitting there focusing on the fact that, like, I really want to check Instagram or I really want a cigarette, doesn't thinking about it just make the craving louder? You know, how do you observe it without obsessing over it?
That is the critical difference between the story and the sensation. Obsessing involves the story in your head.
Give me an example.
It sounds like, I need this, I can't handle this, why is this happening to me? I'm going to fail if I don't get relief right now. That story feeds the panic.
Okay, I know that voice very well.
We all do. Observing, on the other hand, involves curiosity and detachment. It is stripping away the narrative and just looking at the physical data in your body.
Dr. Judd Brewer frames this shift beautifully in the sources. He notes it is the transition from reacting with a panicked, oh no, to observing with a curious, Oh, interesting. What does this actually feel like in my stomach right now?
Yes. That shift from fear to curiosity is intrinsically rewarding to the brain. Curiosity activates entirely different neural circuits than fear does.
It creates distance.
It creates psychological distance. When you analyze the physical sensation, you realize you are not the craving itself. You are just the awareness observing the craving.
Okay, so moving from theory to the actual moment of impact. When your palms are sweating, your heart is racing, and that riptide is physically pulling at you, what is the exact protocol?
You need a system.
Right, and the sources outline a highly tactical toolkit called the PBS micro habit. It's a step-by-step system to biologically override the craving in real time.
PBS stands for pause, breathe, scan. And it is designed to be deployed the exact millisecond you realize an urge has been triggered.
Let's break those down for everyone listening. The P is for pause and press. The moment you feel the urge, you instantly halt your physical movement and press your feet firmly into the floor.
Pressing your feet into the floor acts as an immediate physical grounding technique. Remember, a craving is entirely about anticipation. It is pulling your attention forward into the future, toward the reward.
So grounding pulls you back.
Yes, the physical sensation of the ground beneath your feet provides tangible sensory input. It pulls you out of your anxious mental loop and anchors you back in the physical room you are sitting in right now.
Okay, so once you're anchored, you move to B, which stands for breathe and block. This involves deploying an active urge timer. You set a timer on your phone or your watch for 15 to 20 minutes, which creates a behavioral delay.
You are blocking the immediate action. And that delay is the mechanism that breaks the dopamine cycle. In an active bad habit, the immediate delivery of the reward is what the brain expects. Committing to a 15-minute delay allows that initial intense surge of dopamine to naturally decline back toward a baseline level.
But you don't just sit there staring at the wall while the timer runs, right?
No, definitely not. You engage in resonant breathing.
Specifically, inhaling for roughly 4 seconds and then exhaling for 6 to 8 seconds. The sources stress that the extended exhale is the most important part of this equation.
It is because exhaling longer than you inhale directly stimulates the vagus nerve.
The vagus nerve is so fascinating.
It really is. It is the body's main parasympathetic superhighway. It regulates your rest and digest system. When you stimulate it through long exhales, it releases a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine.
And acetylcholine acts like the body's natural brake pedal. It dilates your blood vessels, slows your heart rate, and essentially sends a chemical message to your brain saying, hey, we are safe. There is no tiger chasing us.
You are manually overriding a glitching alarm system.
I love that. You are hacking the hardware of your body to fix the software of your mind.
That is a great way to put it. By forcing your physical posture and your breathing rhythm into a state of calm, you are widening the space where rational choice becomes possible again.
Okay, so you've paused, and your breathing has tricked your nervous system into a state of relative safety. But the urge is likely still hovering there in the background.
Oh, sure.
How do you address the physical discomfort that's left over? That is where the final step, scan and speak, comes in.
This is where you practice somatic tracking. You scan your body from head to toe to find exactly where the physical sensation of the craving lives.
So maybe it's a tight feeling in your chest or tension locked in your jaw or a hollow pit in your stomach.
Exactly. You find that physical location, you actually place a hand over it, and you speak a positive reframe to yourself.
Something along the lines of, this is a wave, not a command. This is biological activation, not a necessity. This feeling will pass whether I act on it or not.
Placing your hand there is an act of self-compassion, but practically it keeps your attention focused on the physical sensation rather than the panicked story in your head. You are treating the urge as raw, manageable data.
Let me ask a highly practical question about this, though. Say you do the entire PBS method. You pause, you breathe, you do the somatic tracking, and your 15-minute timer goes off, but the wave hasn't crashed yet.
Right.
You still feel the craving. Is that a failure of the protocol?
Absolutely not. It is vital to understand that the goal of urge surfing is not to silence the urge entirely. It is about lowering the volume. Even if the urge is still present after 15 minutes, if it has dropped from a deafening 10 out of 10 in intensity down to a 6 out of 10, that is a massive victory.
Because it's manageable now.
Right. The urge no longer owns the room. By sitting with it, you are building distress tolerance. And building distress tolerance is the very foundation of rewiring a habit.
And if you need a little extra help lowering that volume, the sources mentioned you could deploy some quick vagal resets to help the process along.
There are a few excellent biohacks to force a parasympathetic reset. You can splash freezing cold water on your face, which triggers the mammalian dive reflex.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah, it immediately slows your heart rate and reduces autonomic arousal. Or you can use lateral eye movements.
The eye movement trick is fascinating. You keep your head completely still and just shift your eyes to the far right or far left for about 30 to 60 seconds until you feel a natural urge to yawn or swallow.
Yes, that engages the cranial nerves that coordinate with the vagus nerve. It mimics the natural scanning behavior humans use when they're relaxed and looking around a safe environment.
So it sends a powerful signal to the brain that the threat has passed.
Exactly.
Surviving that 15-minute window with these physical hacks feels like a victory just because you didn't give in. It is exhausting, but it's triumphant.
For sure.
But what is incredibly uplifting in these sources is what is happening silently on a microscopic level long after that wave has crashed.
The real magic here is neuroplasticity. Every single time you successfully use urge surfing and the PBS habit to ride out a craving without giving in, you are physically altering the structural architecture of your brain.
I want everyone listening to think about that for a second. Every time you surf an urge, you aren't just surviving a tough moment. You are actively doing brain surgery on yourself.
You really are.
You are building a stronger, more resilient mind.
Through processes called neurogenesis and synaptogenesis, your brain is growing new neurons and forming new connections. You are actively weakening the old addiction-associated circuits and strengthening your executive control networks.
The sources also highlight myelination happening during this process, which, if I understand it correctly, is basically your brain wrapping electrical tape around these new, healthy neural wires.
That is a great visual.
It insulates them so the good habit signals can travel much faster and more efficiently than the old bad habit signals.
That is a perfect analogy. The physical pathways for the new behavior become wider and faster, while the old pathways just wither from disuse. Furthermore, there is profound healing happening with your dopamine receptors.
This is crucial because when you are in the thick of a bad habit, natural pleasures like a good conversation, a walk outside, or just a home-cooked meal, they just don't feel good anymore. The brain becomes completely numb to them.
That numbness is due to the downregulation of dopamine receptors, specifically the D2 receptors. When you flood your brain with artificial highs, whether from substances or endless digital stimulation, your brain removes receptors to protect itself from the overload.
It's trying to protect you.
Right. But the brain is incredibly resilient. Clinical studies show that within 90 to 180 days of consistent habit breaking, your brain's dopamine receptor density can increase by 15 to 20%.
Meaning your ability to find joy in normal, everyday life is physically restored.
Exactly. Your brain actively wants to heal. Mindfulness and urge surfing have even been shown on functional brain scans to increase the density of gray matter in the regions governing self-regulation.
You just have to give your brain the right environment.
Yes. Through tools like the PBS method, consistent daily routines, healthy sleep, and community support, you allow that healing neuroplasticity to occur.
Pulling all of this together, what we have uncovered today is a radically empowering way to view our own struggles. Cravings are not a sign of moral failure. They are not a lack of character or willpower.
Not at all.
They're simply biological waves, driven by ancient learning systems in the brain.
And because they are biological events, they can be managed with biological tools. You don't have to be a victim of your own neurochemistry.
By utilizing the PBS method, pausing and pressing your feet, setting an urge timer to breathe and block the action, and scanning your body while labeling the emotion, you really take back your power.
It is so empowering.
You use your vagus nerve to calm your body. You use language to wake up your prefrontal cortex. And over time, you leverage neuroplasticity to rebuild your mind.
You transition from reacting blindly to your impulses to being an active, curious participant in your own neurological recovery.
Before we wrap up, there is one final concept from the research to consider as you move forward with these tools.
Think about the contrast effect of dopamine we discussed earlier. Right now, if you are struggling with a persistent habit, your brain might be constantly comparing every experience to a massive artificial high, making normal life feel a bit gray and dull.
Yeah, that's a tough place to be.
It is. But as you use urge surfing to reset your baseline and those D2 receptors slowly regenerate over the next 90 to 180 days, consider this. What small, quiet, everyday pleasure is waiting for you to rediscover it once the deafening noise of the craving finally fades?
When you stop fighting the riptide and finally learn to ride the wave, you get to see the whole ocean again. Thank you so much for taking the time to go on this deep dive with us today. Remember, you have an incredible, scientifically proven potential to reshape your own mind. You are the ocean. The wave is merely passing. Catch you on the next one.
Your journey, your tools. It's the strength to build anew. It's the light to guide you through. It's the choice to find your way. Starting here, starting today.
That brings us to the end of today's session on the recovery protocol and the power of urge surfing. Remember, a craving is just a temporary biological wave. You are the ocean. You do not have to fight the current or use exhausting willpower. You just need to breathe, delay the decision, and ride it out. Your brain is capable of incredible neuroplasticity, and every single time you successfully surf that 15-minute wave, you are actively rewiring your future for the better. You have the strength to do this. Are you ready to transform your mindset and build systems that support your best self? The Your Journey. Your Tools app contains the exact blueprints, positive reinforcement, and diagnostic tools you need to thrive, including the active urge timer we discussed today. Download the app, www.yourjourneyyourtools.com. Be kind to yourself. You are doing better than you think, and I'll catch you on your journey.